Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex. And today I want to talk to you guys about something that's pretty special and kind of dear to my heart in this game. And it has to do primarily with my alliance and the same alliance that I've been with since I started the game. So for more than 2 years with the same group of guys. And right next to the Alliance Tournament, because finally, after probably close to a year of Alliance tournaments being out, or a little bit more than a year, we have finally made it into the top 16 bracket. Now, in order to do that, you need to score somewhere around 155 to 160 million points as a team in Alliance battle. So, if you're not there yet, keep working and grinding out with your team, and I promise you eventually you will get there. I mean, we are proof that you can get there without merging, without any kind of shenanigans, just hard work and finding a solid group of people. But more than that, I wanted to share with you guys what I can now tell you about Alliance Tournament that I couldn't tell you before, because it was just information that I was getting from other people, and rather than regurgitating what someone else might say or trying to piece together what other people think, I can now show you exactly how Alliance Tournament works, and I can give you some tips and some advice for what you can do and how you can prepare your alliance and your teammates and your roster should you be nearing Alliance tournaments, or should you find yourself in a new alliance that is going to be competing in Alliance tournaments soon. Now, one thing I do want to say right away is that much like Alliance Conquest, you are locked in to your alliance during Alliance Tournament. So you can't actually leave or get kicked out of your alliance during tournaments or Conquest, which is good because the group that you win with should be the group that you go into it with. And what I mean by that is it would feel really bad if, for example, you contributed a very good alliance battle score to your teammates, but because you don't have an alliance tournament type roster with invincibility obelisks and those PvP characters developed, you get booted out at the last minute for someone else who has a better PvP Alliance Tournament roster. So thankfully that's not the case. That doesn't happen. When you go to this page, however, for the first time, it gives you a little pop-up screen that you can see now, and it basically congratulates you for getting to the tournament, and then it prepares you for what you need to do. Once you've been confirmed for the tournament, you have 24 hours to set your team. And the team that you set is extremely important because it's going to carry on for the entirety of the tournament. And so if you press that green button at the bottom there, that set team button, you'll be able to see what I mean. The default heroes, if you don't actually participate in Alliance Tournament, which I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you basically forget to set your team, it auto sets your team to Captain America, Iron Man, and Black Widow. So kind of funny that they do that, but obviously those aren't the best 3 characters to choose, so you're going to want to go through your roster and choose. You're not limited only to tier 2 characters or native tier 2 characters. You can really select any character at all, even one that's not fully built yet, not even 6 stars. So it really pulls your whole roster, but you would definitely want to be using mostly native tier 2s and mostly tier 2 characters. If you press this little question mark here, you can see the information here. Teams can only be set during the team setting phase. So once I set this team, I can never change it again for the duration of the tournament. So it's basically from now until the end of the tournament, whether we lose in the first round or whether we go all the way to the finals. And also, in addition to the characters not being able to change, a snapshot will be taken of the character when the tournament starts. So you can see there at the bottom next to team set, it says that there's 11 hours and 23 minutes remaining for the team setting period. After that time, whichever 3 characters I put on this page, they will be snapshotted. And what the snapshot means is that they will collect all of the stats of those characters at the current second that the snapshot is taken, and from then on any changes made whatsoever will not be reflected in the character's actual performance. So for example, my Jean Grey has 2 different ISO 8 sets. I have an offensive ISO 8 set for Extreme Alliance Battle, which is Power of Angry Hulk over here, and then I have Binary Power, which is her defensive or more PvP oriented ISO 8 set. Very simply, if I set my team, and this is the ISO 8 set that I've chosen, it will not reflect in the Alliance Tournament if I then later on select this ISO 8 set. So I need to choose which one. I need to basically set the character up for Alliance Tournament, set the team so it takes the snapshot, and then I can go about doing my business. What that does is it gives the teams that are competing in Alliance Tournament a little bit more time to prepare their characters, but it also means that you have to be extremely careful when you are setting your characters and setting your team up, because otherwise something as simple as an ISO 8 set, maybe the difference between you winning and losing. In addition to those things, my face is blocking some of the characters here, but you can see at the bottom we have this restricted character list. We can see Doctor Strange, we can see Thanos, we can see Corvus. You can't see it unless I hide my camera for a second, but we also don't have Dormammu or Odin available. So those are the 5 restricted characters. This list will rotate, so there will be different characters restricted during different Alliance tournaments. It's not the same, and I believe there is one of the weeks or one of the tournament stages or setups where no characters are restricted. But this restricted list is also extremely important when devising your team. On top of choosing native tier 2 characters, on top of choosing characters that you already have built up, you don't want to select characters obviously that are missing Uru, missing ISO 8 sets, missing obelisks. You also want to pick characters that are going to perform best in tandem, as well as which characters are you going to choose that will perform well against who the other teams are going to choose. And that's really where the bulk of the strategy comes in. Because all of the teams have one opportunity to set their roster, and because we don't know what the other teams are doing, we don't have any more information. So I don't know what my opponent Wanted S is setting as far as their team goes. I don't know what Ultimate X is going to set. I have no idea what any of these teams are using unless I had some sort of personal contact with some of their members, but they probably wouldn't tell me anyways because that would be giving me an unfair advantage. So you need to use the restricted character list and also use your knowledge of the current meta. So it's very good to go back and look at old replays of, or you can't look at old replays, but if you were looking at replays from past tournaments, if you can remember what teams were used and which teams were most successful, you can also look at which teams are most successful. We all know Dream is very successful, but there are other teams that upset Dream from time to time, and what characters and what team compositions they used to get there. All that information is going to help you, but the most important information is the most current one. And so taking the list of Doctor Strange, Thanos, Corvus, Dormammu, and Odin, we can see here that we have a bit of a mixture. So Dormammu and Corvus can be used in some tournament modes because of their ability to revive, which gives you an extra health bar and does kind of stall out the match, especially on defensive ones. Thanos, as we know with his new uniform, is an absolute monster and a headache to deal with. Very, very good defensive character, but also a threat offensively. He's also restricted. Odin, I don't think he sees much tournament play anymore. He would only really be relevant for the leadership, but Jean Grey has kind of overpowered him in a lot of ways, and one of them is for the leadership, because you do need that debuff removal to counter the likes of Doctor Strange and others who have those kinds of debuff effects. Fortunately, Doctor Strange is restricted, so we don't have to worry about him. Doctor Strange being restricted does lower the value of the debuff leadership, but because you are going to see Jean Grey, and she does have a time freeze on her second skill, and because you will see other characters who have other CC effects like stuns and snares and binds and stuff like that, I do still think that she is one of the top, if not the top, picks for leadership. However, we also know that Quicksilver, for example, is a super powered PvP threat, and probably the new meta and perhaps the top 1 or 2 best characters in the game right now for PvP. He can kill Jean Grey, he can kill just about any other character with his chance to pierce, and he's got an extremely well-rounded kit because he's a huge threat offensively with all of his iframes and all of his pierce, but he also has 40% guaranteed dodge. And really there's no solid way or consistent way to counter guaranteed dodge unless you have it on an obelisk or unless you have it native on the character. In this case, Quicksilver has it as well, so he kind of counters himself if you get lucky with RNG, or with a leadership, and that would bring you to think about using someone like Spider-Man 2099 perhaps, who also benefits from guaranteed dodge. He's got, you know, lots of iframes, and he also has that leadership with which is, you know, has ignore dodge. You could also consider Spider-Man. You could also consider someone like Wolverine because he has it on his 4th skill. I hesitate to mention characters that have ignore dodge on a specific skill because the chance that they're going to use that skill and get that bonus is up in the air. My Wolverine could never prioritize his 4th skill, and even though I've selected him against what I believe to be a spider meta or a dodge meta in this upcoming tournament, he might be less useful for me, even though he has the type advantage and all that, compared to someone like Spider-Man 2099 or Quicksilver, because they have that guaranteed ignore dodge built into their skill set for all of their skills, regardless of which one gets prioritized. In addition to those things, you also want to take some time to build your characters carefully for Alliance Tournament, to take advantage of that snapshot feature and to make sure that they're in the best possible position to succeed. And I want to show you a couple of things that I have learned, despite the fact that I've never been in Alliance Tournament, just from watching and listening and learning from other people who have been in the tournament, but also strategizing based on what I already know about both Alliance Battle and Alliance Tournament. The way that it's been functioning recently for Alliance Battle and Alliance Tournament is that a lot of the same characters that you use for Alliance Battle are also used in Alliance Tournament. In the past, this has meant that top level players need to unequip and re-equip obelisks in order to be successful. So one of the best examples was Doctor Strange. People would have a damage proc obelisk equipped on Doctor Strange for Extreme Alliance Battle because he was used on both No Restriction Day and Blast Mail Day, but then they would have to unequip it and re-equip another obelisk that had invincibility, for example. This was also done on the likes of Dormammu, Odin, Thanos more recently, and others. So that's been a really popular strategy to take advantage of the snapshot feature, because you equip the invincibility obelisk for the tournament, it snapshots, then you switch it out for the damage proc, but that's obviously extremely costly in terms of crystals. Now, more recently, we've discovered, or the meta has shifted to the point where, although invincibility obelisks are still extremely valuable for Alliance Tournament and for PvP game modes, we have characters now that pierce those. So the value, especially in that vacuum where you're only expecting to see a handful of different characters, and you know that most of those characters are going to have pierce, makes it so that there's less of a necessity, there's less of an emphasis on that invincibility obelisk. It's still probably the best bet and the safest bet, but as you can see on Phoenix Awakened, she has 80% chance to penetrate with super armor, barrier, shield, all immune, invincibility effect, and that's for 10 seconds. So as long as Jean Grey uses her 5th skill, you have a very low chance of having your invincibility obelisk actually function at all. So that could be totally wasted. And in addition, you do have to weigh the fact that your HP gets multiplied by 8 times in Alliance Tournament. So if I have a character like Jean Grey with 25,000 HP, multiply that by 8, I've suddenly got HP, you know, in the hundreds of thousands, which is a lot. So having an invincibility obelisk, while it is good, if you're going to have characters like Quicksilver, like Scarlet Witch, like Cable, like Jean Grey, who can pierce that invincibility obelisk, and if you're already facing enemies that have huge HP pools in the hundreds of thousands, you may be really missing that damage proc obelisk, especially if your invincibility obelisk is basically being rendered useless. The damage proc will not be rendered useless. It may not proc on your strongest skill, but still 180% of your damage on any of your skills at that level is valuable. So there's been a bit of a shift. There's, I think, a less of an emphasis now on obelisk switching, but there is still a need to re-gear your characters, especially the ones that are used in both game modes. So for example, I know that Quicksilver is used for Alliance Tournament. He's probably one of the top 2 or 3 characters for Alliance Tournaments now, as far as I've seen. But my Quicksilver isn't ready for tournaments right now. If we take a look at his details page, he does have max ignore defense. He does have not max skill cooldown because of his setup with Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2099. So I've intentionally left his skill cooldown lower. It's quite low, actually. It's almost 5% below the maximum, because I know that in Alliance Battle Extreme, when I pair my Quicksilver up with the 2 spiders, if we go over here to Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2099, he will get a bonus. And this team up bonus, Spidey's, gives almost 5% skill cooldown. So I've done this intentionally for Extreme Alliance battle, and this is also done with the likes of Carnage with his skill cooldown, or other stats that you're going to get from a team up. You can use it with Odin when you team him up with Thor and Jane Foster, Dormammu with Hela and Thanos, or Hela and Loki, for example. And now you can see I have cooldown duration at 50%, and I have ignore defense at 50% basically. And this is my Extreme Alliance battle setup. However, this is not the ideal setup for Alliance Tournament, because I don't think I'm going to go in with this team. Although it might seem like a cute option, and it's got a lot of guaranteed dodge, it's got a lot of crowd control effects, and they're all speed characters, this team is extremely susceptible to like a reflect meta, a physical immunity meta, something like Luke Cage. It's still vulnerable to the likes of Jean Grey, and it's also extremely vulnerable to the type disadvantage against someone like Wolverine. So I probably don't want to go with these 3 characters. I also don't have a debuff leadership, so that does put me at a disadvantage. Quicksilver can get webbed up by enemy spiders, so this is not the ideal option. If I go with something like this, for example, this might be good. This might be good enough for Alliance Tournament, but now when I go over my Quicksilver, of course, he is missing that cooldown duration. So I need to assume in more of a vacuum, or more of a bubble, that Quicksilver is not going to have any team-up bonuses. I don't think building a team for Alliance Tournaments with team-up bonuses in mind is really the best option. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to tinker with his skill set now to make sure that he's ready for the tournament. So the first thing that I did was I opened up a second ISO8 slot. It did cost me 100 crystals, but I thought it was worth it, and I rolled Binary Power. I think Drastic Density would have been a better option for Quicksilver, but I'm going to go with Binary Power. I spent 2 million gold. I rolled Binary Power twice. I settled on the second time I rolled it. I'm happy with it for now. But now that we have Binary Power set up and we go over to his details page, we can see that he's lacking Ignore Defense. It's dropped to about 42%, and he's still missing that cooldown duration. Unfortunately, I think that Ignore Defense is less valuable in Alliance Tournament than something like cooldown duration, especially for someone like Quicksilver, who has so many different iframes that he can choose from. So I now need to give him a little bit more skill cooldown. Normally, you could look into something like Uru for skill cooldown. However, I have my Uru at usually 5 or 6 stars for Extreme Alliance battle characters, and you can't unequip Uru. It's always being overwritten, so it's extremely costly to replace Urus, and I really don't recommend it. Without being able to manipulate his ISO8 set anymore, without being able to manipulate his Uru, and obviously I can't give him skill cooldown on his Obelisk, I only have one other choice, and that would be his 4th gear. So normally I have his 4th gear rolled to crit damage, again for Extreme Alliance battle, and the scores bonus that it provides, but now I do need that skill cooldown, so now I can roll this one and change it. Obviously, you will see, or notice, I guess, that having less of the ability to tinker with your different gears, maybe I wanted to roll dodge instead of HP, does hinder the tweaking and the min-maxing for Alliance tournaments, but because my enemies have the same disadvantage as I do, it's kind of a wash. But now we can see when I go over to the details page, despite the fact that I'm still missing Ignore Defense and I really can't get any more at this point, I do have max skill cooldown, so I'm pretty happy with where my Quicksilver is at for Alliance tournaments. And yes, I do plan to use him, so I would be happy with this. I might want to level up some of his skills for a little bit of extra damage, but otherwise he's set. And then I would just have to look into my other characters. If you are going to choose characters for Alliance tournament who also overlap into Alliance battle, make sure you look at those little small details and you prioritize which stats you want capped. I do think that skill cooldown is probably the #1 stat to cap. After that, you might want to look into Ignore Defense. You might also want to look into things like max HP to make sure that you're taking advantage of that 8 times multiplier, and then something like all attack, all defense, things like that at the end. So that is the rundown of Alliance Tournament. I can't tell you exactly what team I'm going to use, but you know already that I have one of my 3 pieces selected for the tournament. I have a decent idea of what to expect from the opponent, and that is where the final team setting construction begins. I don't want to give you guys too much advice on that because I don't know how well my plan is going to pan out, but I will be able to give you guys an update on the live stream, or later on in the next few days when we see how we do against Wanted S. I don't expect to do very well, but I will be watching most of the tournament replays so I can get a really good idea of what I should have expected if my guess is off the mark for the restricted character list, and in regards to who people are going to choose from this list here on the other side. Obviously, the only character I'm missing that is a possibility would be Apocalypse, but I don't see him making a huge splash in this tournament, at least this time around. But anyways, guys, I really wanted to share this Alliance tournament news with you guys. I want to leave you finally with something that's a bit personal, and it may not interest you at all, but I don't really care because it's not about you and it's not about me. It's about my Alliance. I want to take just a little bit of time here at the end, and I want to thank all of these guys and all of the guys who aren't in the Alliance right now, who are in our sister or right hand alliance, because we do have another alliance that we swap members to and from time to time when they get busy with real life stuff and that kind of thing. And I do want to thank them from the bottom of my heart for all of their effort and all of their skill and success in getting us here. Obviously, it's impossible for one person to do it. You need 40 people with all of their hands on all of the oars rowing that boat in order to make it from Staten Island to mainland. So thank you guys so much. Not you guys, them. And thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the Alliance tournament breakdown and my cheesiness at the end. Subscribe if you're enjoying the content and you haven't already. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.